apartment should feel safe, right? For walls to protect you, a locked door to keep out the world, and neighbors just a few steps away. For most of us, that's the comfort of apartment living. You're never really alone. But what happens when those very walls start to feel like they're hiding something darker? You see, apartments carry stories. Hundreds of people live in and out of the same space over decades. Some move on, some leave behind whispers, memories, and, according to some tenants, things that never really left at all. From late-night footsteps in empty units, to stalkers who slip through vents, to entire rooms that shouldn't exist. Apartments can hold secrets you'll wish you never discovered. Now, before we step into tonight's chilling accounts, I need to ask you something. If you love diving into real-life horror stories that keep you awake at night, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss the nightmares I've got lined up for you every week. And hey, if you're already subscribed, you're officially part of the crew brave enough to keep exploring the dark with me. Tonight, we're not just talking about strange noises or a neighbor who plays music too loud. No. These are true stories from people who realized their apartments weren't as empty as they thought. Imagine lying in bed and hearing furniture drag across the floor above you, only to learn that no one lives upstairs. Imagine moving into a new place and discovering a locked door in your own apartment, one that scratches from the inside at 3 a.m. Creepy, right? And that's just the beginning. So grab a blanket, dim the lights, and settle in. Because once you hear these stories, you'll never look at your apartment the same way again. And hey, don't forget, if you're enjoying this so far, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell, because I promise, the scariest part is still ahead. When Alex first moved into his apartment, he thought he had finally found peace. The building was older, sure, creaky hallways, pipes that groaned every now and then, but the rent was affordable, the view overlooked the city, and best of all, it was quiet. Or at least that's what he thought. The first week went smoothly. Days melted into evenings filled with Netflix, takeout, and the occasional phone call to friends. But then came the second week. Around midnight, Alex began to notice something strange. Footsteps above his ceiling. At first, he didn't think much of it. After all, it was an apartment building. People walk around. Maybe his upstairs neighbor worked the night shift, or maybe they just had insomnia. But the noises didn't stop at footsteps. Soon, there was the sound of dragging. Something heavy being pulled across the floor, followed by a sharp thud, as if a chair had toppled over. Now here's the thing that made Alex pause. When he signed the lease, the landlord mentioned the apartment above him was vacant. It had been empty for months. Creepy, right? If you're already feeling uneasy, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because these stories only get darker. Trying to shake it off, Alex decided not to overthink it. Old buildings carry sound, maybe it was coming from somewhere else. But as nights passed, the noises grew more deliberate. Pacing, dragging, stopping, starting again. Then came the dripping. At exactly 2:47 a.m., Alex woke to the sound of water dripping onto his bedroom floor. He jumped up, fumbling for the light, and sure enough, droplets were falling from the ceiling, landing right beside his bed. He grabbed a towel, pressed it against the spot, and looked up, but the ceiling was dry. The water seemed to vanish before his eyes. By the third week, things took a darker turn. One night, while lying in bed, Alex noticed something unusual with his ceiling light. The bulb was on, casting its usual glow, but every few seconds, shadows moved across it, as if someone were walking directly above the lamp. The problem? The light fixture sat directly beneath the upstairs apartment's living room, a room no one was supposed to be in. And then the whispers began. At first, he thought it was the television from a distant unit. But when he muted his own TV, the sound remained. A low, muffled conversation at 3 a.m., the voices indistinguishable but steady. Sometimes they laughed softly. Sometimes they cried. Sleep-deprived and unnerved, Alex finally called the landlord. "Are you sure the unit above me is empty?" Alex asked. The landlord sighed. "Yes, Alex. No one's lived there for months. It's locked up tight. Maybe you're just hearing the building settle." But Alex knew what he heard, and he wasn't ready for what happened next. One night, just past midnight, he woke to the familiar sound of footsteps pacing. He stared at the ceiling, heart pounding. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, two pale, bare feet pressed down against the ceiling, right above his bed. The skin looked gray, almost translucent. The toes curled, flexing slowly, pressing hard enough that Alex swore he could see the outline of veins through the plaster. He stumbled backward, terrified, as the feet shifted, dragging slowly toward the center of the room before vanishing. The next morning, Alex demanded maintenance check the unit above. Two workers unlocked the door and pushed it open, letting in the light. The apartment was completely empty. No furniture, no leaking pipes, no signs of squatters. Except one thing. A thin layer of dust coated the wooden floor, untouched, except for a set of bare footprints. They started near the window, walked toward the center of the room, and then stopped. Not turned around. Not faded away. Just stopped, as if whoever or whatever made them had simply disappeared into thin air. Alex moved out within the month. So what do you think? Was it a squatter hiding in plain sight? A restless spirit who never moved on? Or something far stranger? Something that walks between our world and another? Tell me what you believe in the comments below. And while you're thinking about it, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Trust me, it only gets creepier from here. When Jenna first moved into her new apartment, she thought she'd struck gold. It was cheap, close to her job, and bigger than anything she could normally afford. Sure, the building was old, the kind of place with peeling paint and buzzing lights in the hallway, but it had character. Still, on her very first walkthrough, something caught her eye. At the far end of the living room, half hidden behind a radiator, was a locked door. It wasn't the front door. It wasn't a closet. It didn't seem to lead to anywhere obvious. Just a locked door with no key. When Jenna asked the landlord about it, he shrugged. Oh, that? Just storage. Don't worry about it. Storage, right? Except, why put storage inside the tenant's apartment? Why seal it off and never mention it in the lease? But Jenna was eager to move in, so she didn't push. At least not yet. The first week went fine. Boxes unpacked, furniture arranged. The place started to feel like hers. But then, a few nights in, she woke around 3 a.m. to a faint sound. Scratching. It was soft at first, like a mouse trapped inside the wall. But the sound wasn't coming from the wall. It was coming from the locked door. She told herself she was imagining it. Old buildings make noises. But over the next few nights, the scratching grew more deliberate, more insistent. And then came the whispers. Late at night, Jenna would be lying in bed when she'd hear it. A low, hushed voice, just barely audible. She couldn't make out the words, but the sound raised goosebumps across her arms. Creeped out yet? If this is sending chills down your spine, hit that subscribe button right now. You don't want to miss what happens next. By the end of the second week, the whispers turned into knocks. Slow, steady knocks. Sometimes a single tap. Sometimes 3 in a row. Always from the other side of that locked door. One night, while she sat on the couch trying to ignore it, Jenna's eyes caught movement. The door handle turned, just slightly, back and forth, like someone was testing it from the other side. Her breath caught in her throat. She grabbed her phone, ready to call the landlord, but after a few seconds, the handle stopped. The apartment fell silent again. That silence didn't last. A week later, at exactly 3:15 a.m., she was jolted awake by something far louder than scratching or whispers. Violent banging. The door shook in its frame, the handle rattling as if someone, or something, was slamming against it with both fists. Jenna screamed, stumbling out of bed. The noise went on for nearly a full minute before stopping abruptly, leaving her in suffocating silence. In a panic, Jenna dragged a heavy chair and wedged it under the doorknob. She barely slept, staring at that door until the sun came up. But the next morning, the chair was no longer against the door. It was neatly pushed aside. By now, Jenna was desperate. She called the landlord again, voice trembling, and demanded answers. He cut her off quickly. Don't worry about it. It's just storage. Leave it alone. Click. He hung up. That night, a thunderstorm rolled in. Rain battered the windows. Around 3 a.m., The power went out, plunging her apartment into pitch black. She lit a candle, trying to calm her racing heart. That's when she heard it. The sound of the lock turning. The door handle creaked, then slowly pushed down. The locked door she'd never been able to open began to swing wide. Jenna froze, candle shaking in her hand, as the room beyond revealed itself. It wasn't storage. It wasn't anything normal. It was a tiny, windowless room, no bigger than a closet. The air that wafted out was damp and foul like mold and rot. But what truly made her blood run cold were the marks on the walls. Deep, jagged claw marks, gouged into the plaster. Some high, some low, crisscrossing in every direction. The floor was covered in scratches too, as if something had been trapped inside that room for a very long time. Jenna backed away slowly, never taking her eyes off the door. She spent the rest of the night in her car, parked 2 blocks away, staring up at the dark windows of her own apartment. The next day, the landlord knocked on her door with an envelope. "You need to leave," he said flatly. "Today." No explanation, no discussion, just an eviction notice and a set of cold, expressionless eyes. Jenna never found out what was behind that locked room or what had been scratching to get out. But if you ever move into an old apartment and you see a locked door the landlord won't talk about, you might want to think twice before signing that lease. What do you think was in there? Something human? Something not? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, because the next story is even darker. When Marissa first moved into her apartment, she loved the independence. A cozy 1-bedroom all to herself, filled with thrift store furniture and the smell of fresh coffee in the mornings. It wasn't perfect, the building was a little run down, but it was hers. But after a few weeks, small things began to feel off. It started with food. A yogurt missing from the fridge. A half-eaten sandwich she didn't remember making. First, Marissa laughed it off. Maybe she ate it and forgot. Maybe she misplaced it. Stress at work was making her scatterbrained, right? But the missing food turned into other things. She'd come home to find her books stacked differently on the shelf. Her phone charger left plugged in when she knew she'd packed it. Even the faint smell of cologne lingering in her living room. A smell she didn't wear, and no one had visited her. She tried to ignore it, told herself it was nothing. But deep down, the unease began to grow. And then came the night she woke up. At around 2 a.m., Marissa stirred, convinced she'd heard something in her bedroom. The apartment was silent except for one thing. Breathing. Not hers. Not shallow or distant. Heavy, steady breathing, coming from the direction of her closet. She froze under the covers, straining to listen. The sound stopped. After what felt like hours, she got up, slowly opened the closet door, and found nothing. Clothes hung neatly, shoes lined up, empty. But something nagged at her. Down near the floor, the vent cover looked loose. The screws weren't tight. The metal sat slightly ajar, like it had been moved recently. Her stomach dropped as she realized the vent was big enough for someone to squeeze through. Creepy, right? If this has your heart racing, hit that subscribe button, because it only gets worse from here. The next day, Marissa called the landlord and mentioned the vent. He brushed it off. Building's old. Things shift. Don't worry about it. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. For the next week, she barely slept. She started noticing faint noises, scuttling inside the walls, faint creaks in the floorboards when she was perfectly still. Sometimes, she'd wake up to find her bedroom door cracked open, even though she always closed it. Finally, one evening after work, she came home to find something she couldn't ignore. Her bathroom mirror was fogged up, as if someone had just showered. She hadn't used it since that morning. That was it. She called the police. When officers arrived, they did a full sweep. At first, they found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no one hiding in the closets. Marissa began to doubt herself again, cheeks burning with embarrassment. And then one officer noticed the vent. They removed the cover, shined a flashlight inside, and what they found made Marissa's blood run cold. A crawl space. Inside were blankets, food wrappers, and a small flashlight. Someone had been living there inside her walls. The officers dragged a man out. Disheveled, pale, smelling of sweat and mildew. His clothes were filthy, his fingernails long and blackened. He'd been there for weeks, silently crawling through the walls, watching Marissa at night through cracks and vents. When they cuffed him and let him out, Marissa couldn't breathe. Her apartment no longer felt like her own. She stood frozen as the man was pushed through the door. And that's when he looked back at her. His eyes were wild, sunken, but his lips curled into a strange smile. "She isn't the only one in there," he whispered. Marissa's blood ran cold. The officers brushed it off as rambling, but Marissa couldn't. She lay awake that night, staring at the walls, wondering what else might still be crawling, still watching. So tell me, what's worse? A ghost you can't see, or a living, breathing person hiding in your walls? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, because the next story might just make you double-check every dark corner of your home. Apartments are strange things. They stack people's lives one on top of the other, hundreds of souls separated only by thin walls and thin floors. But sometimes those walls don't separate us from people. Sometimes they separate us from something else entirely. And for one man living in a towering high-rise, a late-night elevator ride turned into a trip he would never return from. It started with a normal workday. He was an accountant, the kind of guy who stayed late to finish his reports, the kind of guy who always came home exhausted, tie half loosened, jacket slung over one arm. He usually got back around 11:30 p.m., when the building was quiet and the lobby smelled faintly of cleaning supplies. That night was no different at first. He swiped his keycard at the glass doors, nodded at the sleepy night guard, and pressed the elevator button like always. Ding! The silver doors slid open. He stepped inside, hit his floor number, 12, and leaned against the wall, staring at his reflection in the dull metal. But when the doors closed and the elevator began to move, he noticed something odd. The numbers above the door weren't familiar. They ticked up 7, 9. Then instead of 10, the screen flickered strangely. It looked like a 12. But the digits were blurred, warped, as if the screen itself didn't want him to read it. He frowned, shaking his head. Maybe it was just a glitch. Old building, broken display. He told himself not to think too much of it. The elevator stopped with a groan. The doors creaked open, and immediately he knew something was wrong. The hallway outside was wrong. His building was clean, modern, all beige walls and neat carpeting. But this floor, this wasn't the same. The walls were yellowed, peeling with age, stained like they hadn't been painted in decades. The numbers on the apartment doors were crooked, some hanging by a single nail. A flickering light buzzed overhead, and the carpet smelled like mildew. He stepped out slowly, confused. Maybe maintenance was working on a renovation? But no, he'd lived there for 3 years and he knew every floor. He had never seen this place before. He checked the door closest to him. Apartment 12G. But his building didn't have a 12G. And then he heard it. The sound of children laughing. At first faint, echoing down the long hallway. But the laughter was strange. It didn't bounce off the walls naturally. It was flat, almost distorted, like it was being played on an old recorder. "Hello?" he called out nervously, his voice shaking. "Is anyone there?" The laughter stopped instantly. Silence. A cold wave ran through him. He turned back to the elevator, but the doors were already sliding shut. Panicked, he rushed toward it, jamming the button with his thumb over and over. Finally, after what felt like hours, the doors opened again. He jumped inside, slammed the button for the lobby. The ride down was silent. Too silent. Not even the creaking of cables or the hum of machinery. Just a suffocating quiet. When the doors opened, he staggered out, gasping with relief. He was back in the familiar, brightly lit lobby. The security guard looked up from his desk with a puzzled expression. "You all right, sir? You look pale." He wanted to explain, to ask about the strange floor, the peeling walls, the laughter, but the words stuck in his throat. He just shook his head and hurried to his apartment, locking the door behind him. The next morning, he couldn't shake the memory. Maybe he had imagined it. Maybe he was just exhausted. He told himself it was stress, lack of sleep, too many late nights at work. but the thought gnawed at him. He needed to know. So the next day he approached the night guard. "Hey," he asked casually, "how many floors does this building have?" The guard looked at him oddly. 12, sir. You know that. No. I mean, do we have a floor with old apartments? Cracked walls? Flickering lights? Like an abandoned section? The guard frowned. No, sir. Everything's the same. Why? The man hesitated, then shook his head. Nothing. Just curious. That night he didn't sleep. And then 2 weeks later he got a call. From the building manager. "Sir, we need to discuss something. Could you come down to the office?" When he arrived, the manager wasn't alone. A police officer was sitting there, arms crossed, face grim. The manager slid a laptop across the table. "This is the security footage from the night you got home late. You told our guard you came back at 11:30, right?" The man nodded slowly. The manager pressed play. There he was, walking into the lobby, heading straight to the elevator. They all watched the doors close. But here's the thing, those doors never opened again. Not in the footage. Not all night. The man's heart began to race. That's impossible. I came back up. I'm here now. The officer leaned forward. No, sir. According to this footage, you never came back out of that elevator. And the man realized something chilling. If the footage didn't show him leaving the elevator, then where, exactly, had he gone? Apartments are supposed to feel safe. Walls to protect us, locks to keep danger out, neighbors close enough that we're never really alone. But tonight, we've seen what happens when those very things turn against us. The tenant who kept hearing footsteps overhead, only to learn no one had lived above him for months. The locked room, sealed away for years, hiding something that scratched and clawed in the dark. The woman who thought she was living alone, until she realized her walls had eyes. And the man who stepped into an elevator that carried him somewhere no one should ever go. For stories. For different apartments. Yet the same chilling truth. Not all walls are meant to protect you. Sometimes they hide secrets. Sometimes they keep things in. And sometimes they keep you in. Apartments stack us so close together, but maybe too close. You think you're separated by drywall, by locked doors, by a few feet of ceiling. But the truth is, you never really know who or what is on the other side. And here's the terrifying part. These weren't old haunted mansions or abandoned hospitals. These were ordinary apartments, places you and I might live right now. So tonight, when you turn the key in your lock and slide into bed, listen carefully. If the walls creak, if footsteps echo above you, if the elevator stops on the wrong floor, don't go looking, because you might not like what's on the other side. And if you made it this far, make sure you subscribe, because every week we dive deeper into the places that should feel safe, but aren't. And trust me, the stories only get darker from here. Candle. So subscribe, turn on notifications, and join me again next time, if you dare.